Just a handful of days ago, no one within NASCAR expected the discussion surrounding Kyle Busch to pivot so abruptly. Fans were still immersed in debates about playoff hopes, simmering rivalries, and whether Busch could tack on a few more victories before stepping away from the cockpit. But now, the entire racing universe has shifted its gaze to something infinitely more tender, the family he was forced to leave behind. And truthfully, that reality is settling over supporters much heavier than most ever anticipated. For years, people knew Kyle Busch as rowdy. They knew him as one of the most ferocious and daring drivers the sport has ever welcomed, a man who never flinched from controversy. Whether you adored him or despised him, you could not look away. Yet behind the microphones, behind the grudges, and behind the whirlwind that accompanied being one of NASCAR's brightest lights, there existed another dimension of Kyle Busch that longtime followers understood well. Away from the asphalt, he wasn't merely a celebrity behind the wheel. He was a spouse, a parent, and someone who genuinely breathed for his household. And now, everything surrounding that household has transformed overnight. During the tearful tribute weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway, attendees described the mood as utterly unlike a typical race weekend. Drivers remained unusually hushed inside the garage area. Crew members appeared visibly shaken. Thousands of spectators stood in silence as honors continued to pour in across NASCAR. And standing at the heart of those agonizing moments were Samantha Busch, Brexton, Lennox, Kurt Busch, and the rest of the family, attempting to remain composed in front of the entire racing world. But the scene cutting deepest into fans right now involves Kyle's son, Brexton Busch. Because to NASCAR followers, Brexton was never simply Kyle's child. He was his closest companion. For years, audiences watched Kyle help Brexton race across the country. They traveled side by side constantly. They celebrated triumphs together. Kyle poured endless hours into mentoring him, refining his skills, and gradually helping him forge his own identity in youth racing. That father-son bond became one of the most cherished family narratives in NASCAR, which is why this tragedy feels so intimate to so many people now. And honestly, a great number believe Brexton could one day carry the Busch legacy into NASCAR's future. The clues were already present before this tragedy. Even at a young age, Brexton had already stacked up more than 100 youth racing victories. Clips of his races spread like wildfire across NASCAR social media, and fans regularly drew comparisons between his driving manner and Kyle's, especially the aggression and confidence he displayed behind the wheel. One especially poignant moment struck fans hard online. Shortly after the news broke, Brexton reportedly swapped his social media profile image for a picture with his father. It seems like a minor detail, but for countless fans, that was the instant everything became painfully tangible. Just a young boy mourning his dad in full view of the entire world. Then another heartfelt conversation began circulating throughout the NASCAR community. Multiple reports suggested Richard Childress Racing might leave Kyle Busch's iconic number 8 car untouched for the time being, with some fans hoping the number could one day become part of Brexton's future if he ascends to NASCAR's top tier. And honestly, that possibility is already stirring deep emotions. Just imagine hearing the words, "Years from now, Brexton Busch will drive the number 8 car." For longtime NASCAR followers, that would become one of the most moving moments the sport has ever witnessed, because suddenly, Kyle Busch's legacy would feel reborn through his son. Yet while fans focus on Brexton's path ahead, many are also thinking about Samantha Busch and everything she experienced alongside Kyle throughout his career. Samantha wasn't merely standing next to a NASCAR icon. She stood beside Kyle through championships, controversies, injuries, enormous pressure, and some profoundly personal struggles the couple openly discussed for years. Many remember Kyle and Samantha speaking publicly about infertility battles and IVF treatments, painful experiences that many families endure quietly in private. Instead of hiding those moments, they shared them with honesty. And that authenticity made countless NASCAR fans feel personally connected to them as a family. That's partly why watching Samantha during the tribute weekend became so heartbreaking for people. Fans remember how fiercely she fought beside Kyle during the hardest periods of his life. And according to several recent reports, the family had also been dealing with major financial strain tied to an alleged insurance-related scam that reportedly cost them millions of dollars. Now imagine carrying all of that weight, then suddenly losing the person who held everything together. That's why many fans feel this story transcended racing almost instantly. Another devastating layer of this tragedy involves Kyle's older brother, Kurt Busch. For decades, NASCAR fans watched the Busch brothers push each other at the highest level of motorsports. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they competed aggressively against one another. But beneath it all, there was always a strong, unbreakable bond between them. And now Kurt is facing something no brother should ever have to endure. One old quote from Kurt has recently started circulating online again because fans now hear it differently after Kyle's passing. Years ago, Kurt proudly admitted he believed Kyle would eventually become an even greater driver than himself. Looking back today, many NASCAR fans think he was right. Kyle Busch became one of the defining stars of modern NASCAR, 63 Cup Series wins, 2 championships, a future Hall of Famer without question. But beyond all the trophies and statistics, the emotional scenes from Charlotte reminded fans of something far more significant. To Samantha, Kyle was her husband. To Brexton and Lennox, he was their father. To Kurt Busch, he was still his younger brother. And to longtime NASCAR fans, he was one of the sport's most unforgettable personalities. That's why the garage reportedly felt so silent during tribute weekend, because Kyle Busch always seemed larger than life. Fans thought Rowdy would always be around NASCAR in some form, whether winning races, grabbing headlines, or stirring up rivalries with other drivers. Kyle Busch was always at the center of attention, bringing energy to the sport every single weekend. And now, suddenly, that energy is gone. Yet strangely enough, many fans believe this may not truly be the end of the Busch story. Because every time people watch Brexton race now, they see a young driver carrying one of NASCAR's biggest family legacies on his shoulders. And if he someday reaches NASCAR's grandest stage, if he someday climbs into that number 8 car, that future moment could become one of the most emotional scenes NASCAR has ever witnessed. Because perhaps Kyle Busch's legacy continues in a different way. Not solely through wins, not solely through championships, but through family, and honestly that may become the most powerful chapter of his entire story. So before you step away from this video, send your prayers and support to Samantha Busch, Brexton, Lennox, Kurt Busch, and the entire Busch family during this incredibly painful time. And if you believe Kyle Busch's legacy could one day live on through Brexton Busch, be sure to subscribe to NASCAR Nation News for more NASCAR stories and emotional updates.